Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dana Render, and I'm the Director of Education for Trees Atlanta, and you are joining us for our Ask the Arborist segment. We do this once a month on the third Wednesday of the month around the lunch hour, and it's your opportunity to ask all of your burning arboriculture questions. Today, if you've never heard of Trees Atlanta, or if you're not very familiar with what we do, our mission is really to protect and improve Atlanta's urban forest by planting trees, doing conservation efforts like with forest restoration, removing targeted species, and also educating. This is one of our education events, and we have a lot of these throughout the month. And if you go to our website at treesatlanta.org and go to our calendar, you'll see lots of events just like this to participate in. Today, we have two speakers. We have Mike Mccord. He's an ISA certified arborist, and he works with Trees Atlanta, as well as he has his own business called the Community Foodscapes. And we have Raul Mederos, who is an arborist representative, an ISA certified arborist, and a TRAQ qualified arborist at Bartlett Tree Experts. We want to make sure that we have a very positive learning environment for everyone. So if you have any questions, and you will be able to ask questions today as they come up, we do have a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A button where you can type out all the questions that you would like to have answered. Feel free to enter questions there at any point in time during the conversation and the presentation. And when we get to our Q&A section, we will moderate those questions for you. You can also submit questions in the chat. And we want to also know how we can serve you better. So after this presentation, you will get an email with a survey so that you can let us know how we did. And also you can let us know if there are any other topics that you'd like to learn about. If you want to learn more about Trees Atlanta, or if you want to follow us on social, feel free to find us in any of these channels, and also more information on our website at treesatlanta.org. So now I would like to let Raul and Mike introduce themselves, and then we'll get into our presentation. We have a presentation about Pest.
Thank you, Dana. My name is Raul Mederos. I work for Bartlett Tree Experts. I've been here about 2 years now. I actually moved up from Florida about 2 years ago, and love the area. We love all 4 seasons, and just look forward to enjoying the mountains more. We've been out there and love hiking, so can't wait to do that more this year. It's gonna be fun.
Awesome. And I'm Mike Mccord. I am a staff member at Trees Atlanta. I've been with Trees Atlanta for about 5 years in various roles. I was a neighborhoods coordinator for a few years, helping to plant trees along our right-of-ways and public parks. And for the past 2 years, I've served as the Browns Mill food forest ranger or project coordinator out at the urban food forest at Browns Mill. And as Dana mentioned, I run the edible landscaping company, Community Foodscapes, where we help people convert their yards into veggie gardens and little backyard fruit tree orchards. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So now we'll have Raul start, and he's going to deliver a short presentation, and then we'll get into our Q&A.
Thank you, Dana. Let me go ahead and bring it up. Okay. All right. So also, first and foremost, I want to thank Trees Atlanta for allowing me to do this presentation. I think it's important that we all have just the knowledge of what type of insects are out there and what they do, what the type of damage they do to our trees, and basically how to keep our trees healthy and keep these pests off of them. Really quick about me, I introduced already a little bit about myself, but just wanted to give you some more information about myself. I've been in the landscape business for about 20 years. Worked with great landscape architects, horticulturists, landscape contractors, and of course, arborists as well. One thing that I do love, other than learning how to hike, is propagating plants. I love trying to propagate from seed, from cuttings, from anything I can get my hands on. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. So today we're going to talk about some insects, mainly just the bad ones, the ones that damage plants and stress them out. So in our area, we have several different types of insects, aphids, beetles, all sorts of bugs, caterpillars, lace bugs, whiteflies, mites, mealybugs, scales, and thrips. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these. I'll touch on a few of them. But if you have any questions, go ahead and ask in the Q&A and see if we can help you out on that. So the first one, a lot of people have these in their yards and may not know that they have them, aphids. There's several different types of aphids that thrive in our area, and they also have a large, wide variety of host trees, some of which are just like hackberries, crepe myrtles, just to name a couple there. And they also feed on your vegetable plants, so you got to watch out for them in your veggies. They're very small. They're about 6 millimeters in length, so sometimes they're really hard to find. If you see any type of wilting on the leaves or curling like you see there in the picture, you can flip the leaves on the backside and take a look to see if you see any shed skins, or even on the bark or the twigs, sometimes you'll see the darker aphids there as well. Aphids, the way they feed, they have these piercing, sucking mouth parts that just suck out the juices out of the leaves. That's how they're injuring the plant. They'll curl up these leaves. The plants can't make the nutrients and the food that they need to live and thrive, and then they stress out. And while the aphids are eating the leaf juices, they also excrete something called honeydew. Honeydew will drop anywhere underneath these plants. So if you have a hackberry, it's going to drop everywhere on your deck, on your cars, your driveway, other plants. And then once that honeydew sits on that surface, sooty mold, which is in natural air, starts to adhere to the honeydew and starts to grow. And you can see a picture there with the black sooty mold on those leaves. The next insect is really an important one because it attacks our large trees, some shrubs as well, but some large trees as well. And it's the Ambrosia beetle. Ambrosia beetles are actually the most serious pest of woody trees in Georgia. Some highly susceptible tree species include dogwoods, maples, Japanese maples, flowering cherry trees, crepe myrtles, the list goes on, oaks, Chinese elms. They'll burrow holes into the trunks of the trees, and then they'll just start going through just the underside of the bark, what's called the cambium layer. And usually these trees are stressed either because of drought or flooding or some type of wounding, whether it be mechanical or intentional. And so because these trees are already stressed, it allows the Ambrosia beetle to attack it easier. Infestations are typically found in the lower part of the trunk, as you can see there in that picture. What happens is that the Ambrosia beetle will start to push out this sawdust, and the sawdust is about the size of a toothpick, so it's very small. Once wind and rain come through, this sawdust is very fragile, so it'll fall off. So it's important to inspect your trees often. Another symptom of severely infected trees is the stunting of the leaves, and also delayed leaf emergence, and also the premature defoliation. So if those are symptoms that your trees are having, you may need to look a little closer, especially now come spring and summer. Another one I want to talk about is the southern pine beetle. There are a few beetles that'll attack our pine trees. The biggest concern is the southern pine beetle. We also get turpentine beetles, but the biggest problem is the southern pine beetle. It's the most destructive one in our area in the southern US, and they're very small. They're only about the size of a grain of rice. As the name suggests, they attack pine trees. A lot of the loblollies, slash pines, a little south from here, are are hosts to them. And usually the pine beetles become active in the springtime, usually right around when the red buds are blooming, which is now, and also the dogwoods. They, just like the ambrosia beetle, they attack stressed out trees, usually due to the environmental factor, drought and stress, drought and just too much water. If the pine tree has enough sap in the tree, a pitch tube will form, and you can kind of see that pitch tube there on the far right. And it is usually white and about the size of a piece of popcorn. The beetles and their grubs will feed on the tissue just under the bark. And interestingly enough, females will emit a pheromone that attracts males and more females. This pheromone, in conjunction with the resin that the tree emits, will attract even more beetles. So it's just a free-for-all at a certain point. And from the first tree, they may spread to stressed, but otherwise healthy trees that are nearby, if there's just the population's too much for that one tree. So not only do you need to take care of your trees, the ones that are stressed, but also the ones that are nearby, and protect them as well. So the beetles invade the main stem, and thousands may attack just one single tree. Each pair excavates a winding serpentine tunnel about 1 foot long, and those tunnels will crisscross, as you can see in the photos. The top one is the turpentine beetle, and the bottom one there is the southern pine beetle. And they'll deposit their eggs in the little niches along that path. In addition, the southern pine beetle, in addition to feeding on the cambium layer, they'll also introduce a fungus called the blue stain fungus. And this fungus will plug up the water-carrying tubes inside the tree. So the combination of the stress that the tree already had, the pine beetles feeding on the cambium, and then the blue stain plugging up all the water transportation system is almost always fatal. It's really important that trees infested by southern pine beetle be removed as soon as possible. You don't want to keep that host there with all those pine beetles in them, so we got to get them out of there. It's really important. And again, being proactive, keeping trees healthy, making sure they got enough water during droughts is important to keeping them healthy and keeping the insects out. So the next one is an interesting one. I kind of like this one. It's unique in a way. It's about caterpillars, but the one that I get the most complaints about is the orange striped oak worms. As you would expect, they feed primarily on oaks. Red oaks, scarlet oaks, pin oaks, and willow oaks are preferred over white and chestnuts. However, they may feed on neighboring trees like maples and other ones if there is a heavy infestation on those oaks. Usually we'll see their presence about August and September, towards the latter part of summer. They start out as an orange to brown moth, which I think is a really pretty moth. Really nice color. It's nice. It's a large 2-inch wingspan. The males are a little bit smaller, and they have somewhat darker forewings. And once the caterpillars are on the tree, they start to chew the leaves. And defoliation is probably not good for any tree, but late season leaf removal is unlikely to kill an average tree. Some oaks have been defoliated for many years in a row without any effect. Small trees, though, if they're completely getting defoliated, it may cause some undue stress and lead to secondary pests and diseases. Something that you can do to see if these caterpillars or moths are in your area. The moths and eggs usually are noticeable in the midsummer. Moths turn up at the porch lights, and they'll start laying eggs in late July. And you can inspect the egg masses underneath the leaf, like you could see there on the top picture. You can start focusing on scouting trees if you notice in the past, the ones that had this caterpillar. Even though the defoliation is not a big deal, health-wise for the tree, the most troubling part of this is the caterpillar's frass or droppings. This is where I get the most complaints. Since most of these oaks are very large, They overhang walkways, decks, patios, um, even pools. So many people don't like tracking in the droppings into their home while they're walking into their front door, or even less when they're in the swimming pool and the frass is all in the pool. That's not a good sight. So that's usually what I'm getting called for, is usually in July and August and September, where they're calling me because they want to get rid of this frass because of all the droppings of those caterpillars. And there is a way to treat them, usually coming up now in April. And there is a photo of the frass. All right, moving on. So lace bugs and whiteflies. The 4 pictures on the left are from the azalea azalea lace bug, and then the 3 on the right are from the whiteflies. So although there are many species of lace bugs, I believe there's like over 60. The one that we're going to be focusing on today is the azalea lace bug. It's really popular in our area. I see a lot of azaleas have some type of infestation of lace bugs, whether it be a small infestation or a large one, but usually I always see some type of insect damage on them when I'm visiting homes. Lace bugs, similar to aphids, lace bugs damage the foliage by sucking out the juices out of the leaf. And of course, it reduces the plant's ability to produce food and decreases the plant vigor. And just like any insect attacking a plant, once you have one with a heavy infestation, it's causing stress. It's most likely where other insects and diseases are going to come in as a secondary issue and cause this plant to stress out even more. The best spot to locate the azaleas, the lace bugs, you can see the damage on the top of the leaf, but you'll see on the bottom, just like those pictures are showing there, you can see their shed skin, and you might be able to see them as well if you have a small magnifying glass. And that's the best spot to find if you can confirm that you have azalea lace bugs on your shrubs. The whiteflies, primarily I see whiteflies on gardenias. Just like we love their fragrant flowers, so do the whiteflies. The adult whiteflies are moth-like. They're covered in a white waxy powder. Whiteflies are not a true fly, but they're more closely related to the scale insects and mealybugs and aphids. They're very small. Most of all of our insects are very small. This one's about 1/10 of an inch. They have a powdery white appearance, and they do have those wings where if you disturb the shrub while you're walking by, or just to see if they're there, if you disturb them, the whiteflies will actually flutter around briefly and then settle back down onto the plant. So that's a good way to find out if you do have whiteflies on your shrubs. As interesting note, a single female can deposit between 50 and 300 eggs at a time, depending on the temperature and the condition of the host. Whiteflies also have the needle-like mouthparts, and they feed both during the immature stages and the adult stages. So they're always feeding on your plants, unfortunately. And similarly to aphids, whiteflies also excrete that sugary substance that we call honeydew. So they will also create a mess when it comes to that. And don't forget that even though I'm mentioning gardenias, whiteflies do have other hosts. So they're not just isolated to one plant, but they can go for rhododendrons, dogwoods, even large trees as sycamores and sweet gums too. All right, the next insect I'm going to be talking about are scales, particularly the soft and armored scales. There are many different types of scales. They really you have to know which one you're dealing with. Usually the host will kind of narrow you down to that. The best location to see if you do have scales on your shrubs or your trees is just examine the branches. A lot of times they'll be on branches, twigs. You can see there's some of the examples. Sometimes they'll be on the leaves in themselves, but they can be anywhere on the plant. So it's always good to scout your plants and see what is going on, particularly when you see something that is not normal. And just like other insects, they are damaging the plants by sucking out the plant juices. The soft scales produce honeydew, the armored do not. The soft scales feed directly on the plant parts that transport the fluids, whereas the armored scales, they actually will draw out, almost like a plumber's snake, just the nutrients out of the cells themselves. So they don't actually will produce honeydew. The scales are very small and inconspicuous, like I mentioned before. They will blend in pretty well, so they're good about doing that, unfortunately. Some of the scales I just want to bring up to your attention, and just the hosts, and you can see how widespread it is. There's a scale called euonymus scale, and of course you'll find them on euonymus, but you'll also find them on hollies and camellias. There's another one called T scale. You'll find that on camellia, hollies, and even magnolias. Gloomy scale, you can find them on maple trees and several other hosts. False oleander scale, sometimes you'll find them on magnolias. White peach scale, you can find them on flowering cherries. There's a wax scale on holly, cherry laurels, boxwoods. Cottony maple leaf scale, of course, on maples and sometimes dogwoods. And tulip tree scale, which is a serious pest for tulip trees and magnolias. And this is not an all-encompassing list, just a quick overview of some of the trees that have scale, that possibly can have scales, and a good location where to start to see if they're there or not. And there is another picture of sooty mold with some scales. All right, so how do we control them? With the good insects, that's where we like to start. So we got some nice insects there that help us manage pests. You can see the ladybug there feeding on, I think those are aphids. So first and foremost, what we like to say is plant the right tree in the right place. So just like any real estate agent will tell you, location, location, location is always the best thing. So make sure that you are planting the right tree in the right place for the right amount of sunlight, and also the watering requirements. If the tree or plant likes it high and dry, don't plant it down at the bottom of a slope or near a creek. Vice versa, if it likes to be wet, don't plant it on the top side of a slope. You're always going to have to be fighting the plant to be healthy and get the amount of water it needs. Also, make sure it thrives in our zone, not just lives, but actually thrives in our zone. We can plant many things in our zone, but only the ones that will thrive will do the best. The ones that don't thrive are always going to be struggling for water, nutrients, struggling to keep pests off of them. So it'll always be an uphill battle. And when you have a healthy plant in the right location, that's when the beneficial insects are going to be the most prevalent. They'll help keep insects at bay, or the bad insects at bay. And from there, it's going to be easy maintenance. One thing that you can do to help with controlling insects, especially during the winter time, is when the insects are overwintering. A lot of times they'll lay eggs either on the other underside of leaves, along the bark, the branches, and by the use of horticultural oils or insecticidal soap, it's an easy way to keep them under control and without using any harsh chemicals. But if we do have to go to insecticides, that's always an option. And there's many insecticides, and there's many different applications that we have in our tool bag. We can do soil drenches, we can do foliar applications. There's organic ones for edible foods, or edible trees with edible fruits and vegetables on them. Yeah, there's a host of different things that we can do to keep these insects off of plants and help the plants succeed and thrive. All right, and that is the end of my presentation. Dana?
Awesome. I think, can you go back to slide 11? We do have a question. Someone wants to know what those helpful insects are.
Oh, okay. So of course we got our ladybug. There's a lacewing, which is the top left. Actually, I think I could put my highlighter on the laser pointer. So this is a lacewing. Lacewings will actually go after azalea lacebug. So that's a great beneficial that we have at our disposal. I think these two are the same. This is a praying mantis. It goes after several different bad insects. I think aphids they go after, and certain other ones. We have parasitic wasps that go after many different insects such as scale. I want to say this is, I'm not sure what type of ground beetle it is, but there are many ground beetles that will attack the overwintering insects down in the ground when they go underground for the winter. So they all do different things and attack different insects or bad insects, and it's a good little army to have to help you out.
It looks like someone would like to know, where can you get some of those insects like the ladybugs, or is there a way to attract some of those to your yard?
So the best way to attract them is to have a healthy landscape. Have a variety of plants. Of course, flowering plants will help too, because a lot of these like to not only feed on other insects, but they'll like to have a just a natural blend of different things. Similar to birds, you always want to have a food source, a shelter source, and a water source. So a healthy, diverse landscape will help attract them. Some of these you can order online. Some of them you may have to go through a professional company like ourselves to get them ordered. I know lady beetles, a lot of places you can do mail ordering for lady beetles. I'm not sure about the other ones though.
Mike, do you have any insight on anything that you've used, especially in your foodscapes that you've done for people?
Sorry, I was struggling to unmute myself. Okay. So similar to what Raul mentioned about the, having a diversity of plants in your landscape, because a lot of these, maybe not the ones listed on that slide, but insects in general, similar to, butterflies, which we're all aware have different host plants. It's going to be, similar with a lot of these insects as well. So the more diversity in the plants you can have, the better. A few things that I've encountered that kind of seem counterintuitive at first, but then make a little more sense when you look at it from like an ecological lens, is going to be, the pesticides and herbicides that people spray. If you're spraying for a particular pest that are on your crops, some of them might be broad spectrum, so they're going to kill the good and the bad insects. One example that is prevalent, all over Atlanta are mosquito spray companies, and I've talked with those companies, and I've talked with folks over at the Department of Agriculture, and most of the chemicals that they use are broad spectrum. So when they're out there spraying your yard or your neighbor's yard in the middle of the day, they're not just hitting mosquitoes, they're hitting all of the insect life. So they're going to be killing our bees, our butterflies, and then also the ladybugs, the praying mantis, the beetles. So when you are killing the whole ecosystem, then when a pest population pops up, you don't have any controls in terms of like natural predators to handle those pests. So then you end up having worse problems every year. So yeah, just having kind of like an ecological mindset, I think goes a long way in terms of making the, your pest control a little easier, so you don't have like a whole a whole swarm or plague of something.
So Raul, kind of on that same lens, does Bartlett have a way to do targeted pest removal?
We do, and that's the first thing whenever you have a pest issue is to identify the actual pest and make sure you're targeting that one pest. We don't like to do broad spectrum. We want to know exactly what we're going against, and we want to do more of a holistic all approach, not just target the pest, but try to help the plant get healthier so it can have its own defenses to go against the plant. Because a healthy plant is your best defense to bad pests. We can be applying, let's use the azalea lacebug. We can be applying something to that over and over again, but if the plant is not healthy, we're having an uphill battle.
Can you all name, and both Raul and Mike, you guys can both answer, can you name some specific maybe trees or shrubs that would be good to plant in a residential landscape to be helpful in mitigating pests, or if there are some, maybe getting rid of pests?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll jump in here first. I would definitely look. So the other thing I want to mention earlier is about the parasitic wasps that Raul mentioned. In terms of pest control, you want to be providing food for those wasps year round, and every species is a little different, but some of them don't directly eat the problem insect. They might eat the pollen that is in the local flowers. So if you can, like I said, plant lots of different types of flowers, and trees and shrubs that flower, then you can provide food year round for those parasitic wasp populations. So they're there when you need them, before you need them. And then in terms of like particular things to plant, I would definitely recommend trees as the way to plant the most flowers. If you've been to any of our bee or pollinator presentations in the past, we talk about how if you plant one flowering tree, it's the equivalent of planting like an eighth of an acre of actual bulbs or something like that, because you're pretty much growing a wildflower meadow vertically. So I think lots of different trees that will flower at different times of year, same thing with shrubs. But if you're looking for an actual like flower or an herbaceous plant, I really love lantana, yarrow, and comfrey. Those three have pretty long bloom periods, so you'll get flowers from like April all the way through October, November, just from those three plants.
Yeah, I agree. It's anything that the flowers will last long. Lantana, I see it all over during the summer, and I think it's great. It keeps attracting not just the butterflies, but all the other insects. So if you have a good array of different flowering plants and trees, and especially when it's throughout the year, things are going to come and flowers are going to come and go. But if you can get something that's going to last long, or even just rotate, your flowers are rotating throughout the year, I think that's a really good way of keeping them there.
And for anyone that's interested in buying some specific flowering shrubs and vines that are native to the area, we are having our native plant sale going on right now. I did put a link in the chat to the Square site so that you can order. We have lots of things that will be food sources to help with anything in your yard. All right.
All right, so the next question had listed was, are palm trees grass or tree?
It is a grass, similar to like banana trees are actually banana grasses. And you know, one way to kind of think about it, I guess, is the way that it grows. You know, most trees and shrubs, when you cut it, you'll see like the cross section, and you can count the rings, like see how old it is. For bananas and palms, if you cut it, you're not going to be able to see those rings. So that's kind of just one way to think about it a little.
So are there certain trees or shrubs that are more prone to insect problems?
I don't know if there's one in particular that's more prone to problems. Usually the ones that we find that are most prone are the ones that are stressed out, whether they're planted too deep or their root collars planted or buried under mulch or soil. It's more environmental stressors on trees and shrubs that will stress them out and not do well. And then that's when you get insects and diseases coming in. But as for one particular one, I can't think of anything in particular. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add is, along with the environmental stressors, the time of year that you plant plays a lot of a role in how stressed out the tree is. So you may have heard it before, but like the best time to plant a tree or shrub is the winter when it's dormant. So for us nowadays, that's like November through February is going to be like your planting season. If you're planting a tree in the middle of July, it's going to be really stressed out, and it's going to be more prone to having issues. And then kind of on that same note, like younger trees seem to have more issues, especially with like the Ambrosia beetle. So we'll treat our young, like 1 and 2 year old trees to prevent ambrosias from chewing on the bark and entering the plant. And I know that I've had some issues in the past with like our native dogwoods and our crab apples in terms of getting really bad ambrosia, but again, a lot of that is environmental.
Just as a follow-up to that, are there any particular trees, species, or shrubs that are in danger of extinction in our Piedmont region because of certain pests that are found here?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything in particular.
The only plant I can think of, and I'm not sure what it's considered, and you might know this one, Raul, is the hemlock and the woolly Adelgid. I know that is an issue, but I'm not sure like to what extent, if it's like we're worried about it going extinct or necessarily, but do you have any more info on that, Raul?
It is a concern. I don't know that it's endangered or anything to that effect. A lot of nurseries still grow it, so it's still a popular landscape plant. But excuse me, I really haven't heard anything about being endangered.
Okay, awesome. So the next question we have here on our list is, do ladybugs help control aphids? Which I think you kind of touched on a little bit already. This person said, I sometimes buy ladybugs at Pikes. Does that work / help?
It definitely helps. One thing to understand about when you have beneficials, that you're releasing beneficials in your yard, they're not going to just be in your yard in that one plant. They're going to fly around. So it may take several cycles of bringing in beneficial insects into your yard for them to be actively controlling the population of the pests. If the population is a small population, then that's really good. It should take care of it pretty fast. But if it's a heavy population, you may have to do multiple approaches to try to control that pests. But yeah, it's not going to hurt. It's going to help to some degree. It will.
Mike, do you have any other insight on that one?
I think, yeah, just thinking about it in terms of like the life cycle of the ladybug, because we're bringing them in as adults and we're releasing them, and then they're going to want to, mate and lay eggs and go through that whole cycle. But if there's not really a place for that in your landscape, then you're going to have to keep doing interventions. So it really is about trying to make the whole system, more sustainable. And then something I just want to add from like the gardener perspective is that there are insects that look exactly like ladybugs, but they're orange. And a lot of people think that they're the same thing, but those are it's actually like a squash beetle, and it will chew up and eat all of your squash and your cucumbers and all of that stuff. So if you've seen an orange ladybug, those are probably not what you want in your yard.
That's so interesting.
But they don't sell those in the store, so you should be good.
I've definitely seen discolored ladybugs. I just thought that they had a different color on them. Interesting. So the next question we have is someone asked, how do trees help us breathe?
Well, first and foremost, they're giving us oxygen. So the more trees that we plant, the better it is for us. And living in the city of the forest here, it's a great attribute here. As long as we keep them healthy and thriving, it's better for us because they'll keep producing oxygen for us.
And then we also help them breathe because we're releasing, CO2, and that's what they take in. So it's really that symbiosis between our species. And if you ever look at the lungs, the human lungs, and you look at the kind of more microscopic view of it and the alveoli and all of these different membranes, it looks pretty similar to a tree and its network of branches. So it's kind of like the trees are our outdoor lungs. That's the way I like to look at it in my little hippie world.
So when should someone actually call an arborist if they're noticing pests in their yard?
Once they notice a pest in their yard, they should go ahead and call for an arborist just to evaluate the plant and the trees, see how they're doing, and see what remedies there are available. Sometimes they're very simple remedies, and sometimes it gets a little complex and goes into a program where we're visiting the property a few times a year.
So someone asked a very specific question, so I'll read it. I have several Japanese maples. I noticed that one of them did not lose all its leaves when the other trees lost theirs, and they appeared to be dried up / withered. Is this an indicator of disease? There was a canker at the base of one of the trunks. It's a multi-trunk. And we actually had to prune that particular large limb last year as the ends had died.
Just from that question, it seems like the tree was stressed to some degree, and it seems like there's some decay in one of the trunks, and that's why they had to prune it back. It could be that the tree itself that one particular tree is stressed, and it's not the leaves are not or not changing and falling like they should. That's a good indication to have a certified arborist go out there and take a look at it and see what's going on.
Here's a question. Are there some natural pesticides or things that homeowners can use that are safe for the plants and also even animals that they may have?
There are some natural pesticides available for homeowners. Whenever you're getting a pesticide, make sure to read the label thoroughly. Even though some pesticides are natural, there are regulations to keep them from polluting water sources. So even though they say natural and it's seems perfectly healthy and safe, you always want to read the label, because applying too much of that product could be poisonous to fish, or to it can even be detrimental to the plant itself.
So we
Mike,
have
is there anything that you've used in your landscaping that would kind of go along with that?
Yeah, I mean, the only things that we usually use are going to be like the horticultural or neem oil. And of course, like good old manual control, like picking off individual bugs. We do a lot of that with our vegetables. And I haven't had too many pest issues, thankfully, knocking on wood here, with our fruit trees or our berries. But we do definitely have lots of pests with our veggies. But yeah, I just don't have a lot of experience with herbicides or pesticides.
So we have another more specific question. It says, I have a pine tree that looks healthy to me. However, it's lost all its needles. Is it a sick or dead tree? The tree looks, oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the question.
Usually with pine trees, if all the needles have fallen off, that's not a good sign. They're not deciduous, so they're supposed to be evergreen. Definitely have an arborist take a look at it. It could be dead, even though everything else looks perfectly fine. It could be a dead pine, and depending on where it's located on the property, it may have to be removed.
Yeah, because I mean, it is natural for pines to lose their leaves, partially throughout the year. But if it's totally naked up top, that's definitely not a good sign. If it's a pine tree, some people do get confused with like the plant identification, because there are trees that look like pine trees that are deciduous and they will lose their needles. The one that we plant a lot of with Trees Atlanta is called bald cypress. And bald, it loses its hair, loses its needles in the winter, and those will flush back out in the spring. But if it is like a normal pine tree that has those longer needles, then I would definitely have Raul or another arborist come out to your site.
Awesome. All right, we have more of a consulting question. Is there a resource where we can send pictures of a plant that may be diseased? We have a bush that has spots on it, and we weren't sure if the agriculture extension or someone else might help, or some other options. They specifically want to know if there may be virtual and or low cost options for initial consults.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if the extension office offers that. I'm not sure about that. I'm going to look into that as well. I know for us, we do free evaluations. So if there is a concern about any trees or shrubs that may be diseased, you can always call our office and make an appointment. And one of the 3 arborist representatives here will go out and examine and evaluate it to see what it has and what options there are. And it's free of charge. There's no charge to go out there and take a look at the property.
All right. Are there any closing remarks? It looks like we've asked all the questions that have been submitted to us.
I just wanted to say that starting with the right tree, the right place, keeping it healthy, and just all well balanced landscape on the property is your best bet to keep pests out and keep them healthy, and everyone's happy. The plants are happy, and so are the homeowners.
We just got one more question. Is the yellow ladybug poisonous?
I don't know. How about Michael? Do you know?
So there's like orange and yellow ones. The one that I'm familiar with it's called the Asian lady beetle, and I know that they can bite you, but I don't think that they're poisonous or anything like that. And I think it is rare for them to bite you, but it does have that ability. But it's mostly they want to bite your squash leaves is the big thing.
Mike, do you have any closing remarks before we close up?
No, I think these were great questions, and I appreciate everyone for joining us on their lunch break.
Well, we thank you for joining us as well, and we will send this recording back to you so you can rewatch it if there's anything that you missed. And also we'll send out information for both Mike and Raul if you'd like to contact them for any kind of consult. So thank you guys again for joining us with Ask the Arborist. We look forward to seeing you next month.